Good day, my name is Bijou. I am a sophomore at Sweetbriar College. I would like to begin by thanking you for allowing me the honor and privilege of speaking with you today, as well as thank my faculty advisor, Dr. Arcus Hardy, for his unwavering support and guidance throughout this journey, and the Sweetbriar Honor Committee for allowing me this amazing opportunity. This past summer, I conducted my summer honors research on diversity in the wine world. If I had to conceptualize and capture the 8 weeks of research that I conducted, I would describe them as a dinner party with an environmentalist, a pro-free trade wine producer, and a pro-government regulation politician. From 8000 BC, wine has infiltrated all aspects of society. It has existed as an aromatic reminder of the influences, culture, and behavior of civilizations and its people. In our paper, we employ a systems approach to analyze solutions to diversify the wine industry. We interrogate the role of government control frameworks and ideologies utilized to shape consumer tenets and preferences with regards to the wine industry. We assess hierarchical and patriarchal systems of structure, power, and governance, influences, market opportunities, and trends that negatively affect diversity in winemaking. We analyze the impact of a free trade market economic approach relative to a robust regulatory framework on the sectors of agriculture, manufacturing, and trade in the wine world. We intend to focus on the adaptability of diversity within the wine industry from race, gender, age, and class to varietals, with a special interest in the Norton wine grape varietal, an indigenous wine grape that won the 1873 International Exhibition in Vienna. Finally, we apply philosophical theories to examine the dichotomies that exist between the identities of a consumer and a citizen, and its implication on the wine consumption and regulation. We argue that until we assess our relationship to power, our preferences and behaviors as consumers, and our relationship to the natural world, then there cannot be diversification in the wine industry. And that diversity in the wine industry is the intentional amalgamation of ethical thinking and application with regards to economic endeavors and political governance. Within the research that we conducted, one of the most paramount questions that we pose, and has engulfed much of our conversations, discussion, and debate, is how does a country provide the needs of its citizens and still protect their interests as consumers? We address this question through a critical analysis of the exploratory behavior of consumers and the political measures imposed by governments as a means of oversight to govern the consumer. My research is broken down into 5 sections, the first of which is the dissemination of the American wine industry. The endeavor to create world-class wines in North America began immediately, and with that they immediately failed. The first attempts at cultivating wine was started with the utilization of the native grapes discovered at the time of the European New Settlement. European settlers came to quickly discover that the indigenous grapes of North America, specifically the East Coast Vitis cordifilia, was unsuitable for the phenomenology of the wine experience and the character of the wine palate. The European grape species is the Vitis vinifera. This is the renowned wine vine. It produces a wine high in sugar, low in acidity, and it is engulfed in bold, full-bodied flavors with bountiful plump grapes. Many people believe that the importation of grapevines would produce resilient and appealing grapes. They soon came to discover that the grapes would thrive for a short period of time, but soon after die as a result of disease and the terroir of the land. This would plague the American wine industry for 2 centuries. In regions of South Africa, South America, and Australia, the European grape flourished at once, for there were no indigenous grapes there. In North America, however, native pests and diseases had grown up with the native grapes, and after a long period of time, the undisturbed cohabitation of these surviving native vines had come to terms with the pests and diseases. The repetition of success and failure persisted for decades. At the time, there was little to no knowledge of plant pathology, horticulture, viticulture, and enology. Growing wine in America became a game of faith, hope, and experiment. The Virginia wine industry. Grape growing and winemaking were at the core of Virginia's founding. As such, many decisions and acts were implemented to ensure that the wine growing and winemaking were at the heart of Virginia's economy. Almost all of the founding fathers were would-be wine growers. Jefferson's interest is well known, but Franklin, Washington, Madison, and Monroe were almost as eager as he was to see wine growing succeed in this country. Virginia is a state that embodied a climate so unique to that of a wine region. Its subtropical, humid, cold winter seasons allowed for unparalleled potential and possibilities. The Norton wine grape. The Norton wine grape, also known as the Norton Virginia seedling, or Norton's Virginia, is a wine grape that not only traces the origins of American winemaking, but also sets forth the future of the wine industry. The Norton wine grape holds the identity of being a grape that forever changed the trajectory of wine cultivation and drinking in America. The Norton wine grape's success is widely attributed to Dr. Daniel Norton, who was born in Williamsburg, Virginia in November 1794. With his keen interest in the wine grape and the labor of slaves, the famous Norton wine grape varietal was born. We move into the descent of the Norton wine grape, regulatory implications in the wine industry. So the prohibition was a national effort to try and stop the trade of alcoholic beverages. Efforts began in the late 19th century, but legislation was implemented in 1920. Prohibition created a unique economic landscape. The legislation allowed for wine producers and consumption under three categories. The first was to produce wine for sacramental use in church. The second was for medicinal purpose. And the third was a loophole that would plague the wine industry for decades. And according to Section 29 of the Volstead Act, each household was permitted to produce up to 200 gallons of non-intoxicating fruit juice for consumption by family members over the age of 18. The word non-intoxicating was misleading and was a misleading directive. For many homegrowers, the lack of knowledge and experience in the background of winemaking and the lack of skill sets that the individuals had attributed to the limited creativity and created a unique underground market where selected producers would come to the household and craft wine and bottle the wine. This narrowed the market and forced Virginia growers to cater to a small demographic. Many people turned to making moonshine and hard liquor as a result. The problem that this created was it cultivated a loophole in America that we would spend decades trying to reverse, which was the newfound shift in wine taste. There was also bureaucratic red tape as the country moved towards prohibition. Everyone from the Department of Agriculture to the president were hesitant in supporting any endeavors having to do with the wine industry. There was also a shift in wine predilections. The heavy governmental regulation of alcohol would have a devastating effect for decades. The provisions of repeal led to wide variations in state laws governing the production and consumption of alcoholic drinks. This did more harm than good for the wine industry. As it was, the quality of wine had been so degraded by the dismal efforts of home growers and the loss of professional skills in winemaking infrastructure that it took the industry almost 50 years to recover. We move into the tensions of terroir and taste. I utilize new institutional economics to analyze the effects and beliefs and solutions to diversifying the wine industry and determining what institutions and stakeholders are best suited to intentionally and strategically implement change. In the field of economics, structure, organization, and systems are important and essential in their ability to be analyzed, assessed, and scrutinized. To interrogate and dismantle the lack of diversity in the wine industry requires that we first dismantle and interrogate the systems and structures that infiltrate societal norms, ideologies, and behaviors. Political structures and systems of governance are to be concerned with the citizens. It is about governing the citizen. Capitalism is an economic structure, and it is concerned with protecting the interests of the consumer. I utilize the framework of neoliberalism as my free market perspective. Neoliberalism is an ideology employed as a means to enforce and advocate for economic and political power. It asserts that competition is a driving force that ensures transactional exchange, underpins societal human relations. This belief establishes that and reconceptualizes the citizen as a consumer. This belief suggests that one's purchasing power is a profound expression of direct democracy. Furthermore, it asserts that the buying and selling of goods and services is a process that increases efficiency. It is an argument that supports shrinking the public sector and expands the private sector. Neoliberalism, in essence, is a revival of laissez-faire economics, a belief that minimal government interference opens the market to greater opportunity and success. Neoliberalists champion reductions in tax rates and globalizations and liberalizations of trade, the advocacy of privatization, and the deregulation of free trade. It is often argued that free trade could open up the market for wines across the globe as well as provide greater opportunities for individuals to join the industry and compete on a global level. What neoliberalism and neoliberalist enthusiasts are often remiss in acknowledging or recognizing are the implications of trade and transaction costs as they exacerbate social and economic inequalities. I move into a pro-regulatory perspective, a quasi-corporate totalitarian state. I utilize Paul-Michel Foucault, a renowned historian philosopher who had a strong influence and has provided unique insight into humanity and social science disciplines alongside philosophy. My inclusion of Foucault's analysis of power and his role of government and governmentality, as well as the philosophical analysis of neoliberalism in the world, is to illustrate the extent that the practices and remnants of totalitarianism still exist in our modernized governments, political systems, and economic systems. This has allowed for corporations, companies, businesses, and self-interest to significantly influence our democracy, whereas one's purchasing power is an act of direct democracy and political influence. As a result of a vast amount of natural resources, habitats, ecosystems, and communities have been exploited by large corporations, companies, businesses, and government structures to the point of failure as extreme consumerism, indulgence, consumption, and sensationalism placate and manipulate people and communities into surrendering their liberty, rights, and autonomy in the market. Their participation in government and decision-making processes. This is dangerous as it reinforces the power and influence that individuals who unequivocally benefit from patriarchal and hierarchical systems have. It also ceaselessly oppresses specific groups of people that are disproportionately represented, affected, treated by transactional costs or government regulations and oversight. It ensures that corporations, businesses, and corruptions run communities and countries which directly encourage the lack of diversity within our industries, the elitist nature of specific industries, and environmental degradation of the earth and its benefactors. This is essential in understanding how the wine industry, an industry so heavily supported and responsive to consumer ideals, preferences, and tastes, needs to be interrogated and reformed. To understand the rationality of having regulation and regulatory behaviors act in accordance with our economic system is to understand how governmental regulation is in response to governing a consumer and not the industry itself. If we do not interrogate our relationship to power and its role, function, and behavior, it asserts that power and not competition dominate our society. The wine industry consists of three primary sectors: agriculture, manufacturing, and trade. I believe that through a combination of government regulation and free trade, we can increase access and equity to the industry, facilitate a multicultural inclusive climate and the environment in the industry, create a diverse and global wine world, create a greater opportunity for scholarship and research in viticulture and enology, introduce greater biodiversity and selection of grape varietals. In conclusion, diversity begins with introspection. It requires that we disseminate information, attitudes, behaviors, and ideas that we hold true, internalize, and act on. It requires that we interrogate our relationship to self, our relationship to others, and our relationship to the world around us. The attempt to diversify the wine industry requires that we evaluate the industry through three lenses: the history, the practice, and its representation. This allows us to understand where the wine industry has been, what it is doing, and where it's going. More importantly, we must evaluate information, attitudes, behaviors, and ideas of the consumer that shape the industry, the influences the industry, and what the industry has had in shaping the consumer and the effects of its influence in our natural world. In trying to diversify the wine world, immediacy, resiliency, and relevancy are crucial. Immediacy is concerned with why diversity needs to happen now. Resiliency is how we can ensure that our efforts are sustainable, intentional, and impactful, and relevancy is why diversity is important. In diversifying the wine industry, the goal is to increase biodiversity, integrate greater inclusivity and diversity in representation, and expand economic opportunities to cultivate a sustainable, inclusive, and equitable wine world. We can do this through a philosophical framework. The intersection of our economic trends, systems, and behaviors, our systems of governance, philosophical considerations, and environmentalism efforts are essential in reforming the wine industry effectively, ethically, intentionally, and strategically. The lack of diversity within the wine industry, from varietal selection and popularity to demographics, are important opportunities for much-needed change, growth, and reform. We must pay attention, we must unravel in an attempt to build, and we must begin to reflect introspectively and collectively. This concludes the research I conducted this summer alongside Dr. August Hardy. Thank you again for allowing me the privilege to speak with you and share in community and conversation with you.